Aye.
Mr. Tripp?
Aye. Motion carries. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no resolutions to bring before you today. I do have surplus equipment that would appreciate your consideration for declaration as surplus so we can sell it at our annual garage sale, which, if okay with you, we would have that at next month's Highway and Bridge Committee meeting in the month of September. I have 8 items specifically. There are photographs of all 8 items on the photo sheet there for you to take a look at. If you have any questions about any of them, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, any declaration of surplus equipment is my recommendation, please.
Is there any questions? Need answered? Okay. A motion to approve would be in order. Mr. Enns? And there's a second to the motion. Mr. Scholl. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you. Old business, as of, I don't know when that was, the last committee meeting or last county board meeting, or the county board meeting before, long-range planning for the highway department facilities. And I'm not certain that I know which way we want to go with this, other than my comment concerning this is a pretty simple one. When we discussed this at some length at one of our past committee meetings, I think my position has always been one of there's no strategic reason why we need to be located on the Kankakee River. However, if we did, if it was the board's position to go ahead and move me off of there, that we do so at no expense for replacing existing facilities, expense to the highway and bridge funds. And then I went on in my comments to the board in my lengthy presentation there that if we do this, that we do it right, that we hire somebody that has some familiarity, some expertise with regard to public works facilities to do some planning for us. I don't have those names with me right now. I happen to know one company that has some expertise in that area. And we also have some other counties that have recently gone through some expansion of their facilities, or relocation of new facilities, and those sorts of things that we can do some research on. But I would recommend that the committee is in earnest about this and choose to go forward with this. We do hire somebody that's got some expertise, or take a look at a few do some requests for proposals, take a look at a few folk out there that can demonstrate that they've done some work like this in the past. If this is in fact the direction that the committee wants to go, with that I'll flesh out, see where this is going.
Mr. Scholl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pertaining to this, I had the opportunity to go down to Champaign County's open house and tour their new facilities, and they're state-of-the-art. And I inquired as to the time frame. You know, my contention is if something like, I think the issue isn't moving off the river from my point of view. If we can build an aesthetically pleasing structure there, that's a different issue altogether. But if we're going to modernize the highway department, one of the things I asked, well, how long did it take you to get this in motion? The actual getting everything together, and they had a number of things done in advance from the engineer and from the highway engineer, was at least 5 years. So, you know, we have to anticipate what would be the demands, what would be the need in the highway department 5-10 years down the line. What did I do? Sorry, but I mean, this is something that I think we need to be looking at. Where are we going to be 10 years from now, 15 years? But they brought in some other. I think we have to be careful not to get, as Shaky once told me, don't get the cart before the horse. One of the things we have to anticipate, and what I thought was fantastic in their program, was the computerization. I think we need, that's the future. We need to computerize more and more of our things. They have service facilities for all of the county vehicles within the highway department. And we don't even know how many vehicles we have in the county, let alone a uniform servicing structure. We need to look at that. We need to look at a number of things before we even consider moving the highway department or improving. So I think, we're looking at opening up a dialogue with what we want as a county, and then proceeding from there. So, it's not something that Jim has brought to us. It's something that was introduced, but I have no problems with long-range planning. But if we're going to do it, if we're going to build a structure, I don't care where you build it. If you build it on Main Street, it's got to be a modern facility, computerized, everything. I mean, I saw that facility, geothermal heating structure, the light structure. I was amazed. Just, I could have spent all day snooping in corners in that structure. I mean, it was aesthetically pleasing, it was well-built, and it was in the...
State-of-the-art.
It was state-of-the-art. It was in the town itself. And I wouldn't mind living next door to it. I mean, so I mean, the location, to me, at this point in time, is not the issue.
Is that because the streets are always plowed, streets are always
Good.
plowed?
Yeah. But it is.
Any other comments? Discussion? Ms. Schmidt?
Nice job. I saw you thought about that before you said it. Bob is absolutely right. We do need to look at long-range plans, and that's what we're here for. And we probably should look 30 years out or 50 years out. I think you would, if you hired someone to do a study of what the needs are for the county highway department, which I think is the first beginning of this, I think you would find that since we are kind of strewn through the neighborhood, because the lot that we're on the river right now is too small to hold the whole highway department, that would probably be best that we move to an area where you have more acreage and more room for the highway department. But that's up to the person who does the study to conclude. I talked to Champaign County, and you're right, they are state-of-the-art. They built all concrete bunker. It cost them a lot of money. And other highway departments that have built in the last 10 years or so that I talked to about that felt that they were a little upset. They had gone a little bit over the top, but they had the money to go over the top. And the other highway departments felt that it wasn't so necessary to be so concrete, let's put it that way. They felt like steel buildings and stuff were sufficient, and you could still do the technology and the geothermal heat and things like that. So they spent way more money than I think we need to spend, but I think you have to find a happy medium. So I would like to see this committee, if we can, decide to at least find somebody to hire to do a study on the space needs of the highway department.
Any other comments? Ms. Bernard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I concur with Mrs. Schmidt. I think that we need to get started on this. I also, at next week's Community Services Committee meeting, I'm going to ask Chairman Lear to put on the agenda getting back to the Strategic Planning Group for Animal Control. I think these are just two departments that, all the departments, we really need to start looking at long-range planning for all the departments and have some concrete goals. If we don't, we just keep doing what we're doing, and you don't have an opportunity to grow. I'm going to make a motion that we go ahead and hire someone, or engage. Karen, did you want to see us actually hire somebody at this point, or what? Yeah, I make a motion that we look at hiring someone to begin a space needs study for the highway department.
Mr. Olzoff? There's no second yet.
What about? I want to get a second before I speak.
I didn't know if you want a second.
Second in the chair.
I'm on a committee, otherwise I would.
I would recommend getting estimates as to Karsik, if he knows of those people, and discuss it at the next meeting.
Okay? There is a motion on the floor, no second as of yet. Mr. Enns?
All right, I can-
All right, more discussion. Mr. Scholl?
I think we're getting here in quote shaking the cart before the horse. There's so many other studies that need to be done prior to expending money, which we don't have for this study. I mean, after seeing this, I think this is fantastic, and I disagree. I don't think the metal structure is the right way to go. I don't think this was overly excessive. It was anticipatory of future needs. You're not going to build for today, you're going to build for tomorrow, and you've got to keep that in mind. So we need to do other studies within the county and gathering information within the county rather than at this point trying to hire an outside consultant. I would ask if there are needs, Jim could provide those, but I am very interested in seeing the feasibility and other departments' response to establishing a common motor pool for the county. And that revenue could go into the highway department, or however you want to structure that, as that revenue staying within the county. So, I mean, there's a number of other issues we need to resolve, inquire about before we move on.
Is this to the motion? Mr. Enns?
My understanding, that motion was only to get estimates, right?
No, it's to hire somebody, that's the wording that I got.
Okay.
So you're committing beyond
All right,
a recommendation.
okay. I misunderstood the motion. I thought it was for Jim to get estimates.
Okay,
Actually hire somebody, I withdraw my motion.
Okay.
Second.
There's no second to the motion.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, if I may, thank you. I will withdraw the motion, and I'd like to make another motion that we have Jim bring someone in next month to talk about this instead.
Bring someone in for what?
To talk about what we may be looking at for our needs.
It's not specific enough for me.
Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Oldon?
We don't have the expertise to make this judgment. I think we need experts that do this. Mr. Karsik is an expert for us. He can research and bring forward a
recommendation.
I don't know, well, Jim, what would you recommend?
Back to you.
Early retirement's not an option yet.
Oh, he's young now.
There are planning consultants that are available, architectural consultants, public works facilities consultants, those sorts of folks, I think, that are capable of doing a needs assessment for the county of Kankakee, Department of Highways, for the future. We could bring somebody in, perhaps, that might be willing to come and speak to this committee and give us an idea. I mean, ultimately, I think we might be in a position where we're going to publish some requests for proposals.
Are we able to do some of this in-house?
No. I mean, what in-house is going to be able to provide is, it was part of my earlier presentation, that we make available some of our folks, some sort of a subcommittee that does not only include supervisory personnel, but the folks that work out in the shop and the folks that work out in the garage over there. Some of our rank and file folks that are out there that do this, that have to work within those facilities as a resource for the planning consultant to ask appropriate. They know the questions to ask, and our folks can answer because of firsthand knowledge of working in that environment. So yes, there will be, in my opinion, and my recommendation is that there will be people that are employees and our supervisory staff from the engineering division, from the from the fleet division, from the maintenance division, that will be part of this exercise, that will answer questions that experts know how to ask in order to formulate a plan for how much space is needed. And and how that might be configured to make it the most efficient space that they can use.
No idea what something like that would cost.
Boy, Bill, I don't know. Never done one of those.
Can you get an estimate for our next meeting?
I don't know if I can do it by the next meeting. I'll make work of it, certainly, but whether it's available or not in 1 month, that might be pushing the envelope a little bit.
Mr. Scholl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basic question then. On the task that the Highway Department is asked to do by the county, and the facilities that we have, are you able, within the foreseeable future, 5 years out, to perform the functions and the tasks asked by the county within the existing facility?
Barring any radical changes in the growth, I mean, super traffic generators, those sorts of things, yes.
Thank you. If I could follow up.
Yes.
Then, Mr. Chairman, I would strongly suggest that we take the first step and look at how do we anticipate what the committee's preference is, if a restructuring or a rebuilding in the Highway Department were to take place, how do we anticipate this to be paid for? And what the general feeling of the committee is, where that money is to come from.
George? I'll get you, Mr. Schmidt. I'll get there.
I sense from some of the statements that have been made that we're talking about more than just the highway department. We're talking about including possibly the sheriff's department. You're talking about a motor pool. You're talking about servicing all of the vehicles within the county. Is that correct?
That's one possibility.
So the source of information would also have to come from members of the sheriff's department as well. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I think Bob is right, but you can only determine how you're going to get the money if you know how much money you need. And the only way you're going to do that is if you have someone do a plan and then deal with the plan as it is. If you don't know how much space you need or what direction you want to go in, if you're going to do a motor pool, if you're going to do just the highway department, if you don't establish your direction and establish what those needs are and then deal with the cost of those needs, which a study will do, and we all know that, come on. I mean, what is the fear here? I just sense fear in the room of moving the highway department. I don't get it. Why don't we just check it out and see? I've got a brochure here for an architect out of Decatur that has done several different public works and different things that we could. And what's wrong with doing an RFP? It doesn't mean we've spent money. We haven't done that yet. It's just, we're just checking things out.
Any other comments, Mr.? Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Jim, do you want to take on the responsibility of the fleet that the county owns? Do you think that should be your responsibility?
I'll answer that from a lazy administrator point of view. Of course not. But
I mean, you're looking at 4 or 5 guys full time. Well, just to do that.
we did this in the past. Let's go back a little bit. The highway department from time to time has serviced motor vehicles outside of those vehicles that are under the direct supervision and maintenance responsibility of the highway department. For instance, we service the sheriff's vehicles. But we did that with a reduced staff. We didn't really expand our staff to accommodate the type of service load that we experienced from time to time from the sheriff's police fleet and other fleets that were out there. And the understanding with the other departments was that we would take care of our motor vehicle fleet first so that we could accomplish our primary duty and responsibilities. as a highway department. And then, once that was done, then we could service other motor vehicles in the fleet. Now, that put some stress on the other vehicles that weren't part of the highway department fleet. And as a result of that, over a period of time, as our labor costs began to go up, and they did, the cost of paying our qualified mechanics at the highway department has gone up considerably over the last 10 years. And the other departments that formerly utilized us as a service agency for their motor vehicle fleet found that they, on my understanding, they found that they could get their vehicles serviced and repaired economically and perhaps even more quickly by outsourcing that to private industry within the Kankakee County area. Now, that's my interpretation, that's my take on what happened. Whether or not those other departments, like the sheriff's police, for example, would be willing to re-engage the services of the highway department with or without an expanded professional staff, technical staff. I mean, if we were going to do this in earnest, we probably want to expand our technical staff so that we could service those on a timely basis, a more timely basis than we were in the past. That's a question that needs to be asked to those other elected officials, because we can't make that decision for them. Certainly, the county board is in a position where you could take other vehicles that are in the motor vehicle fleet that are under the auspices of the county board administration and not other elected officials and say, hey, this is where we want our motor vehicle fleets serviced. And we could ramp up for that, right? We could tool for that, both in human resources and in the equipment that's necessary to do that. But that'll be a policy decision that you'll have to make before we move in that direction.
Mr. McLaren first, and then Mr. Washington.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't argue that we probably need to look at a long-range plan for the highway department in the future. Something Mr. Pekarsik said, though, I think really struck a bell here. Before we think about hiring a consultant, to get down to the rank and file folks, to find out exactly what the wants and needs are going to be. I believe more things that can be done prior to a consultant coming in will probably help our costs with it. It'll be less time a consultant will have to spend. We're looking at different things as far as servicing all the vehicles. I mean, I think that information should be brought forward first. I think it should be brought back to this committee to talk about a little bit too. And then I think you have all your ducks in a row, ducks in order before you have that consultant come in. And it might help with the expense in the long term. But I mean, to get the input from his employees and all the various entities in his department, I think is essential before we start bringing somebody in.
Mr. Washington.
When I asked the question, my belief was that if we initiate a long-range study, is that all of these questions should be included in that long-range study so that we have a better picture of what we want to do and what we are going to be expected to do and what's going to happen in the growth of the county and the development of all facilities to meet those needs in the growth of this county. It wasn't just something that I would say the county is going to say, well, all vehicles are going to go to the maintenance department for services. It was to include those things in the study so that we can make a determination at a later date whether it should be all-inclusive or how we would set up the future highway department.
Okay, there's some things I've been thinking about. I've been through some of this at the campus.
Right.
And the first thing we would do is interview architects, planners, to get their idea. And just interview them, what kind of history they have, production they've had, then they give you a price. No money committed yet.
That's a request.
And then you develop a budget for that particular thing only. They come up with a plan, including all the input from the people here, that's the next phase. Then you come up with a budget